Hello, everyone. The long shadow of COVID-19 is still uh, all pervasive, while the impact seems to have reduced and the caseload substantially reduced. But there are pockets of concern both in India and abroad. And there are questions in terms of what is the way ahead? Will there be a fourth wave? How effective will the current vaccines be in the context of newer variants that are emerging? What's the way ahead in terms of approaches to the booster doses, and what are the messages that that experts have for on the way ahead for people and the precautions to be taken. We have here Dr. Gagandeep Kang, virologist and professor at Christian Medical College, Vellore, who has deep insights on this subject and who's tracked it very closely. Thank you so much for your time, Doctor. May I begin by getting your assessment of what's your reading of what's happening on COVID, Doctor?
I think that things are in a good place around most countries in the world, except in China. In most places, we have low numbers. In some places, South Africa, Australia, some parts of India, there are increases. But those increases are largely in cases and not so much in hospitalizations and deaths. So if we think about SARS-CoV-2 being a virus that we are going to be living with, I think this is the shape of things to come, that we will continue to see peaks in different parts of the world at different times, the evolution of new variants that will drive those peaks, the finding of unvaccinated pockets where there may be an increase in cases, but not the kinds of levels of hospitalization and the mortality that we saw in 2020 and in 2021.
Doctor, what do experts mean when they say we will see infections but not disease?
Basically, you'll have lots of people who test positive, but the illness that they will have will be mild and will be something that can generally be handled at home in the bulk of people. At no time with no virus, not just SARS-CoV-2, can you guarantee that everybody will have only mild disease. But you can say with confidence that the bulk of people who have been vaccinated will have mild disease.
Now, Doctor, what about the concerns around a fourth wave?
Well, it depends on how you define a wave. If you define a wave just as cases or people testing positive, sure, we might have waves, because every variant that comes that can establish itself in a human population has to be a variant that has an immune escape advantage over what exists previously. So, everybody is vaccinated, everybody is infected. So the variant has to be able to evade that immune response and spread in human beings to be able to cause that increase in cases or waves. The likelihood is that the bulk of the variants that we will see will not cause severe disease. If they do cause severe disease, then we will wind up with a wave that has an increase in the number of people who test positive as well as hospitalizations. So the first kind of wave, which is just an increase in the numbers of cases, I'm not particularly worried about, because that is what we have to learn to live with. The second part of the wave, second definition of a wave, where it is not just cases going up, but hospitalizations going up because the new variant causes more severe disease, is the one that we should prepare for. And that preparation is a combination of making sure that we have sufficient genetic sequencing over time in specific populations and strong links to clinical information so that we can see what is coming.
And why do we need that, Doctor? So that we know which variant is more transmissible and is prevalent?
Well, actually, the variant doesn't matter if you don't know what the variant does, right? If we know that the variant is going to be one that causes mild disease, then your health system does not need to prepare. If you know that the variant is one that is going to cause severe disease, then you know that the health system needs to be ready for whatever might be coming. Remember, COVID-19 is not the only thing that the health system deals with, even if it has felt like that for the last couple of years. I think it really is time for us to build a health system that can handle COVID-19 as well as all of the other things that we should be looking at.
Doctor, how do you read the preparedness of our system in reading the variants that are and what they are doing at the moment? The point that you raised just now. How well equipped and prepared are we there?
So I think one of the things that happened that was good was the establishment of INSACOG and the amplification of sequencing capacity in the country. But sequencing data has to be linked with clinical data so that there is appropriate action that is taken. INSACOG is a very centralized structure when actually it should be as decentralized as possible. It is a slow structure where speed is essential in order to be able to assess the level of threat. And it is not linked to clinical information in the way that it should be, that allows us to have a rapid understanding of what's happening with variants in different parts of the country. It's a great first step, but there are many steps to go on this journey of using sequencing data. So having the sequence information is of no value if you don't understand the behavior of that particular variant. And what do we need to know about the behavior? We need to know, does this variant spread better? Can this variant infect people who have been previously infected or previously vaccinated? And when this variant infects, how severe is the disease that it causes? Will it mean just cold, cough, fever, headache? Or will it mean people not being able to breathe and winding up in hospital?
And there we need to do more.
There we need to understand. That's why I said clinical information is critical. Your cases will tell you how bad this variant is really going to be, and you need to characterize the first few people who are infected really well.
So closer tracking of that is what we need to focus on.
Exactly.
Doctor, this point about now this newer variants doing the rounds. So this, in terms of either the vaccination or the booster doses also, when do you see the need, or what's your view on redesigning the newer vaccines now? Will the same old vaccines, for how long will they continue, given that the variants seem to be emerging by the day?
I think you brought up a really important question. When we developed the first vaccines in 2020, the focus was, let's get vaccines and get them quickly. Did we think then that these were going to be the best vaccines, the vaccines that we would use forever? No, we never thought that. These were first generation vaccines, and all vaccines you want to iterate to try and get better vaccines. And what is a better vaccine? A better vaccine is one that gives you the longest lasting protection with the greatest breadth against a range of variants. Do we have that at the moment? No, we don't. So there are ongoing studies that are looking at vaccines that can give us much more protection. They are called broadly protective beta coronavirus vaccines and broadly protective coronavirus vaccines. There are a number of modalities that people are using to develop these vaccines. It's going to be complicated to develop new vaccines because you will have to rely very heavily on being able to measure the immune response in people. And it's going to be very challenging to do the kinds of clinical efficacy studies that we were able to do for the first generation vaccines. But this needs to be done. Otherwise, we'll wind up in the situation that we are in today, where nobody knows who needs a booster or when they need a booster, or which is the best vaccine to boost with. So you just try and do the best you can on the basis of incomplete information. I hope with new vaccines and newer vaccination strategies, we will make better informed decisions. To give you the greatest breadth of protection, how many variants can one vaccine protect you against? So ideally, right now, we know that we've had Alpha, Delta, and Omicron, which caused global waves. We've had Beta, Gamma, which did not cause global waves, but were important locally and seemed to have greater immune escape than some of the other variants that did spread globally. So you need a combination of the ones that spread and the ones that escape the immune response. And the vaccine should be able to protect you against all of those or most of those. So if we look at the results that have come out from Moderna, for example, if you use the older Wuhan variant and you use the beta variant vaccines, you get a broader protection where giving a dose of the beta variant gives you better responses against Omicron than boosting with the Wuhan variant. So we are beginning to learn about the breadth of responses. There are a number of studies that are ongoing in the US and in other parts of the world. But I also think that it's important for us to set up to do these studies ourselves and to look at making modified vaccines in India.
So more studies on in India and trying and developing a modified vaccine is perhaps the way forward in India.
Absolutely.
What do you make of these strategies in other countries, like for example, China, zero tolerance and all? Is that an approach at this time should be taken?
A zero COVID policy. When you have a virus that can cause asymptomatic infections in humans and also has an animal reservoir, eradication of that virus is near impossible. You know, the first virus that we eradicated was smallpox, and we were able to do that because smallpox was restricted to humans. We are now trying eradication of another human virus, polio, and we have not been able to do it so far despite investing lots of effort in it. Why? Because polio can cause asymptomatic infections. So if you look at SARS-CoV-2, not only can it cause asymptomatic infections, it also has the ability to cross into animals and come back from animals into humans. Once you have a virus like that, it becomes nearly impossible to eradicate. SARS-CoV-1 we were able to get rid of because it did not cause asymptomatic infections, and transmission happened only when a person was symptomatic. So good infection control allowed us to do that. Now, in this situation, the two key features, asymptomatic infection, animal reservoirs, make it nearly impossible to think of a zero COVID strategy.
What do you make of what is happening in India today in terms of people moving as if nothing has happened?
If you can't eradicate the virus, you have to learn to live with it. And learning to live with it is establishing as individuals and as a society what the limits of our risk tolerance are. If we are to think about, people have different levels of how much danger they are willing to face. If you want to completely protect yourself from SARS-CoV-2, then you should not be interacting with other humans at any time. If you want to have some level of protection against SARS-CoV-2, you should be vaccinated, you should be careful about who you're interacting with, and you should be wearing masks. If you are young and healthy and believe that you will not have severe disease or you have already been infected, then your risk tolerance might be very high. And you might say, well, I want to live my life and I'll take my chances. The chances of severe disease in young, healthy people are really low. So I think this is where education is important, where the preparedness on the part of the government and the health system to respond in case of a crisis is important. But I also do think that we need to give people a little leeway to determine how much risk they are willing to take.
The one important vaccine, which was the indigenous vaccine, Covaxin, as a doctor, as a medical professional, as somebody in terms of your advice to people, what is it that concerns you at the moment?
Well, I think it is a matter of significant concern when a regulator or a quasi-regulatory body like WHO, they are not regulators, but they do advise the world and they set certain standards for manufacturing. If WHO has told Bharat Biotech that there are issues with their manufacturing facility, I think that is a matter of concern. Bharat Biotech has responded to that by saying that they are not producing the vaccine at the moment and they are addressing all of WHO's concerns. It is our regulators' responsibility to assure us that every batch of vaccine that has been made by Bharat Biotech meets the criteria of safety and quality. And I'm sure that there are no batches that have been released by the Central Drug Laboratory that have failed any of the criteria that our regulator has laid down. So I think people should not worry because there has clearly been testing of the batches that are available in the country. But it's a reminder that quality standards for any kind of biological product need to be very, very strict. And any company, as I'm sure Bharat Biotech realizes, needs to comply not just with national standards, but also with international standards to ensure that Indian products have a good reputation around the globe.
In conclusion, doctor, anybody all those who are listening to you and seeing you, what's the key message on COVID-19 today, as far as India is concerned?
I think we are going to have to live with this virus, but in many senses, we've been through the worst. So, with the experience that we have, what was painfully gathered through 2020 and 2021, I think we have the tools to be able to address any challenges that the virus throws at us in the future.
So I think we've been through the worst, study more, and perhaps design better vaccines.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, doctor. Very nice. And I think very important points raised for you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.